my name is Jen Zlinska and I'm the Creative Director of MPavilion. I'm speaking to you from my home in Melbourne, Australia. I live and work on the lands of the Woiwurrung people of the Greater Kulin Nation. I pay my respect to ancestors and elders, past and present, and to any First Nations people listening to or watching this conversation. I acknowledge this was and always will be Aboriginal land, and that its sovereignty was never ceded. MPavilion is an ongoing initiative of the Naomi Milgram Foundation. Since 2014, a prestigious architect is commissioned to design an architectural pavilion that is built in the Queen Victoria Gardens in the heart of Melbourne. And it provides a platform and shelter for a 4-month season of art, design and architecture events each summer. In 2020, we were unable to build a new pavilion. And instead, we were determined to deliver the program. So we persisted with a hybrid version, which has taken on the form of many online events such as this and IRL events hosted in existing MPavilions across the city, and since January in a car park designed by Peter McIntyre in the Melbourne CBD. Each month, the program is curated around a different theme. March's theme is space, experiments and time. The theme was in response to a nearly 5-month lockdown here in Melbourne, which with time felt uncertain, tangible, and in some ways limitless. And so for March, we set the premise of handing over the space to artists and designers for a month of temporary experimentation and to play with the idea of time. Design Trust, critically homemade, is the perfect example of an experimentation in time. The idea is a micro-initiative conceptualized and curated by Marissa Yu, director and co-founder of Design Trust. It was born from an effort to alleviate the pandemic's impact on Hong Kong's design community and beyond. And I feel very privileged to have some of the designers here this evening to share their experiments, responses, and designs to the critically homemade brief. I'll hand over to Marissa to share more about the project and introduce the speakers.
Great, thank you, Jen. That was a wonderful introduction. Thank you so much for having us join your wonderful space experiments and time. I'm going to quickly show my shared screen and also want to respond, as a reaction to the pandemic or the effects of a time. There is a drive with each and every one of us, again, to be human again. And I think that's been a moment of community resilience that we've, reacted to, and also most importantly, collaborate. And so I think the spirit of this generosity of MPavilion hosting us online, and also the generosity of all these extraordinary designers who are sharing their time today, have given a lot to rebuild what, in one sense, the design community and industry really needs. So again, thank you for the opportunity. And I'm going to pull up my presentation. Just give me 1 second. And I really hope you can actually see my screen. Great. I hope you see this. So just a very quick background on who we are as a foundation, and also today's speakers participating. We have Frederick Guru with us, Elaine Ng from Fabric Lab, Yip Gaichun Miriam, and Agit from Inter-Island Festival in Hong Kong, Fu Li from UV Architecture, and also Hugh Davis, also based in Melbourne right now, joining us with Jen from MPavilion, of course. It's been a really extraordinary few years for us in Hong Kong, and although we are a non-profit organization, we have a passion and interest to accelerate research, design, and development of experimental, meaningful intellectual projects, and looking at the positive role of design through this lens. We are now 14 years old, but at the same time have been quite active in the last 8 years, supporting all sorts of design research projects, whether it's fellowships, mentor think tank studios, but with a lens to positively impact our region and also international connections through different disciplines. As you can see, it's been really extraordinary. We have a commitment to support young researchers, and this is a 2017 project. C grantee Paul and Evelyn got a grant looking at 12 really wonderful acts of films that they've created that lends itself to supporting new cultural pavilions in Hong Kong, while another pavilion and museum is being built in Hong Kong, just to give some backdrop. We've been instrumental also in revitalizing sites and spaces in Hong Kong, which have now been transformed into cultural spaces. Central Police Station is now become Daigun, and it's been a really interesting access point for us to look at our culture and our community over the last decade, and be part of that kind of cultural invigoration. At the same time, shortly we'll be exhibiting Henry Steiner's work, looking at the role of he's seen as the father of graphic design. Arrived in Hong Kong in 1961, and soon we'll be having a retrospective looking at all the extraordinary work that's impacted the city and our region, from logos, identities, and communication works. We've also expanded a lot more in the last 10 years, doing a lot in the Greater Bay and Pearl River Delta area. So it's quite exciting. I saw Fu Li, who's speaking with us physically last January, but now still virtually connected. But we've always been supporting a lot of extraordinary work between Shenzhen and London and Hong Kong also. This project done by Brendan and Louisa, looking at acts of design, history of the drones, to all sorts of participatory works in our community. And as I'm sharing this, it's quite important as a backdrop just to talk about the resilience of the community and how much, despite design is always seen to connect, it's been really difficult to also collaborate and craft and make. So although we have a sense of optimism and still ongoing supporting playful installations, projects for the community, it's really made us think at core, what is Hong Kong, what is our region, and how we connected to cities around the world. So we've had a very young group of communities looking at the culture of making in Hong Kong, archiving that. I think that's extraordinarily important, and also to restore and rethink our identity in the context of the international cultural context right now. In 2017, we kicked off a Future Studio program looking at the role how design and experimentation can actually produce, hopefully, agitate and change policy. So we're quite pleased that some of these projects are now unveiling shortly. We're building a whole series of community parks, which unfortunately was stalled and frozen for the last few years, unfortunately, due to all sorts of social conditions to the pandemic. But we are coming out of the fourth wave, and hopeful to share quite soon the optimism of design's role to communicate, playful spaces, community spaces, as a way to bring the community together. So before I kind of start, we actually had all this ambition to share all these wonderful works in Milan Fair, to even in Melbourne and Shanghai. And that made us, as a nonprofit organization, rethink how we could still remain connected. And this brought us to a community micro-initiative, both as a way to restore social connection, and also as Hong Kong was going through both the second, third, and fourth wave. A lot of surveys we did had communities impacted from loss of funding to studios shut down. So it's been a very traumatic, but also extraordinarily inspiring moment for all of us to rethink. And our organization wanted to reach out, and so we invited our community to respond to this challenge called the Collective Brief to create in 3 weeks something from home, a homemade prototype object that could also be fabricated in collaboration with other creatives, could be functional and address social, educational, environmental needs, and especially the intergenerational connection, and just being kind of intellectual, but also sustaining. We wanted these objects to fit in the palm of your hand, and a question how it could foster well-being for our community. I'm going to share a very, very short video to communicate what had happened since May last year, since we pushed that brief out. And in the rest of today's discussion, it's really exploring through these incredible designers and thinkers and intellectual agitators, how they responded to the notion of critically homemade in the context of how to continually experiment. So I'm going to stop share that screen and then bring up the short video, and give me 1 second.
Design Trust Critically Homemade is a response to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the design community and beyond, and conceptualized to encourage creatives to critically examine the drastic changes in the world and participate in the formation of a collective response to these new norms. We are lucky to have Hong Kong-based designers, regional friends, and international collaborators continue to share their innovative prototypes that are both emotional, sustainably driven, and inspirational, showing community strength and creativity. This micro-initiative expresses innovation, reflection, lightness, and hope, represented by the transformation of our Design Trust D from its typical dark blue hue to a multicolored rainbow of hope. This rainbow is a message of optimism and resilience that parallels the intention of this micro-initiative, where small acts of making and gestures of generosity expand to more support within and around communities. Design Trust Critically Homemade.
Yeah, so since that video and also that sharing, we've received over 76 prototypes and involved 132 designers. What's been quite telling and extraordinary is the actual commitment and process of testing these ideas, not only just from the design community, but overall the outpouring of support that we actually needed to receive to continue the kind of production at stake. So what's been really fascinating is since we launched the activities and the show, we had also been able to exhibit the works at once. So I'm going to quickly show my screen one more time. Excuse me. Sorry, let's try to get this up to speed here. And we were able and very lucky to have venue partners, pop-ups around the city. This is at the Soho House that launched in the end of September. It was this kind of very speedily put together show, but also just to rethink the physicality of these event spaces to bring the community together. It was quite an emotional moment after not just the COVID, but pre-COVID, Hong Kong had faced quite a lot of challenges to physically see a lot of people, even pre-COVID times, the community coming together and building access to many discussions about the role of design. It also allowed us to reflect a lot about the foundation's purpose, dug out a lot of our archives and realized in the last 14 years, we've actually, really generated a lot of new work and innovation, and that allowed us to kind of begin to reimagine our values, our priorities, whether it's creating work relating to the culture of Hong Kong. How are we able as designers to respond quickly to COVID-19 challenges? We had, Michael Young making antibacterial door handles, to designers like in the video you saw, making healing metronomes to kind of calm the kind of psychology of being in these really tight spaces in Hong Kong and the urban conditions of the digital divide that we faced. So although it's very hopeful and optimistic, it was really a moment of also rethinking our values. So actually what's been extraordinary, as the prototypes came in, they started to kind of wrap around these curatorial themes, a lot on culturally Hong Kong, sensory and wellness, upcycling, environmental issues, to notions of education and play. And, we've for a long time been fighting for history of Hong Kong through the lens of unknown work. So even someone as innovative as Indonian started baking homemade cookies in Chinese Hong Kong font styles. And now we have them being sold in different stores to fundraise for our nonprofit. We have incredible ceramicists and educational and experimental makers putting these really incredible hijacking Lego bricks with scholarly rock designs now also being sold in stores, made out of popcorn they left from home, firing away in the oven. We had designers globally around the world creating new social distancing measuring tapes, questioning hygiene standards. Why is it 1.5 meters, not 3 meters or 2 meters in different global conditions? So I just wanted to give you all a quick highlight. Casey Wong was looking at scarcity of resources. Everyone had to queue up in supermarkets to buy instant noodles to toilet paper. So that was also another response to COVID-19 context. And really unbelievably inspiring Stanley Wong, who's been documenting mountains and taking walks during COVID because of the shutdown of other spaces, and photographing mountains around Hong Kong for the last 20 years, but accelerated because of COVID-19. And this extraordinary photo is actually his sweat line of his t-shirt, his black t-shirt, as a response to critically homemade and his own body being part of the context and well-being. And I will just end closely here before I invite everyone up to share their prototypes. This one is extraordinarily special. Flory and Christine have been part of our community for many years. We supported their work on future seacraft and sustainability. They realized a lot of stores in Hong Kong had shut down in Causeway Bay, had collected the debris, construction sites, and also re-innovated with some of our old materials from our former Future Studio program to create a hopeful, optimistic message of a Hong Kong brick made out of terrazzo and various materials from different cities in the world, and collapsing it into a symbol of hope to rebuild our city and the region. So with that kind of overview, I wanted to bring in the speakers. It's super exciting to be part of the MPavilion. And also forgot to say thank you. I mean, Naomi Milgram Foundation, I had the opportunity many years ago to be part of the Livability series. And it's just so great to have a potential to reconnect again. So thank you so much, Jen, for inviting us. So the first speaker friend is Frederic Guru, who worked with his wife, and he's an industrial design entrepreneur in Hong Kong, trained as an engineer in Belgium, and worked as a designer of Philippe Starck and Stefano Giovannoni. And I can go on, but he's so inspiring, and I would love to invite you to share on your prototype and your real product.
Thank you very much, Marissa. When you asked us to join the initiative, that was the moment that more or less 1/3 of the world population was under some form of lockdown. And obviously a lockdown has an impact on our everyday lives. Like, starts from small things like the extra kilos you get from all the home cooking, but it leads up also to stress because you're being cooped up with your wonderful family on a small space, particularly small in Hong Kong. And together with Paulina, we were sitting down and thinking, like, what can we do about that? Well, the best thing obviously is a good workout. Well, hey, that was not possible either because all the gyms were closed. And most people don't have gym equipment at home. So how can we make gym equipment with just stuff we have lying around the house? Basically, for those who are old enough, MacGyver style. It's the way we make also quick and dirty prototypes in the office, like quick proof of concept. And one of the first things we came about were these rubber bands that we all have at home. And we said, okay, that we can transform into the resistance band. But how do you make from something so small to a resistance band that is much bigger and needs a lot more resistance than just this? And then our smallest daughter overheard us and she was like, wait, I have an idea. And she went into her room, threw open her closet and started digging through her stuff with stuff falling out. And she dug up her old little loom set. And she said, like, well, instead of the little bands, we can use the big bands. And she started looming away and making this endless strip. And yes, it was having a lot more resistance, so we doubled it up, and that's the way we had enough resistance to create the resistance band. And the second thing we created was the skipping rope. But then again, the only stuff we had at home was like this kind of cotton rope, which is obviously way too flimsy and way too light to skip with. And then Paulina said, well, you know what? I can actually crochet something bigger out of that. Like, crochet is kind of her thing, like it's her therapeutic sanctuary. But she didn't have a tool that was big enough to crochet something like that. So what we did was we took a piece of bamboo with some barbecue skewers and some masking tape, and that was the tool. And she was happy. She took her bowl of cotton rope with her tool, disappeared into the sofa, and she was out of the picture too. And Yasmin my elder daughter, was looking at all of this. She's like, this is all very interesting. Can I document this? It's like, yeah, sure, you can be the director. So she started filming. And over dinner, we were sitting there and said, like, okay, we have two objects. Would it not be nice if we could make the Holy Trinity? And we had water bottle, obviously, on the table. And I was like, yeah, that can actually be a perfect way to form a dumbbell. And you have small water bottles, big water bottles, so the different types of weights. And basically, that's how we had all our elements. But those were just elements. They were not finished gym equipment yet. So we needed a linking factor. And yeah, one of the obvious things that came up was bamboo. It's something that you find everywhere around in Hong Kong. It's natural. but also it is a symbol of resilience that shows that like this thing will not last and there will be an ending to this. So that was the perfect, both mechanically and metaphorically, the perfect element to bring the whole set together. And that's how we created Sweat, the simple workout, exercise, and training. And yeah, thank you very much, Marisa, for inviting us, because in the end, it turned out really to be a whole family group project. Everybody that walked by wanted to chip in and to help. And so if you have time, go check out the video as well of how we made it. It's available on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you. And soon you'll be exhibiting this in Rio and Inter-Island Festival. That's our desire. Great. And I hope you can hear me back on our next person, who's also a dear friend now, who's based in Melbourne, Hugh Davis, who was also our former M+ Design Trust Fellow, interdisciplinary artist, educator, and investigator with many leadership roles in the arts technology sector in Melbourne. And he's been extremely dedicated in looking at Hong Kong architecture in the video game vernacular. So welcome again, Hugh. Good to see you. It's been a long time. Over to you.
Thank you, Marisa. Yeah, it has been too long. So yeah, I've spent periods of time in Hong Kong, I suppose over the last 6 or 7 years, and I've been investigating that city in a range of ways, and most recently, I suppose, in 2018, 2019, and even in the present, looking at how that city appears in video games. But actually earlier than that, in 2016, I presented a pervasive game in that city with a fellow artist, Troy Innocent, as part of the International Symposium of Electronic Art, which was held in that city at that time. And as part of that, I actually made a full model of the Hong Kong sort of Victoria Harbour front using timber. And it was part of a game where you would wander around the actual city of Hong Kong scanning codes that would lead you into the Innovation Tower at PolyU. And you could use these codes and play with the actual board game of the city, which was about sort of 3 meters by 2 meters and all handmade. And I've had this model Hong Kong ever since. And literally just in suitcases in my house, because I had to fly it over to Hong Kong and then back to Australia. And when the lockdown happened last year and when Marisa invited me to be part of this project, I sort of thought, well, I want to make something, but I'm not able to access any materials. So I thought, well, I'll use what I've got lying around the house. And of course, I had this city. I had a Hong Kong, and so I started repurposing some of the buildings into seal stamps, into traditional seal stamps, which is something that my wife does a fair bit as a Japanese calligrapher. She does Japanese calligraphy, but then she makes seal stamps to sign the works. But I spent a lot of time talking to her and talking to a couple of good friends, Joyce Cheng and Nikki Lam. Joyce is a journalist and poet and academic in Melbourne, and Nikki Lam is an artist and curator and arts worker in Melbourne. And we, along with a few other people, were involved in a Hong Kong studies reading group at that time, and still are, where we would discuss texts, discussing what was happening in Hong Kong and the history of Hong Kong and academic papers on Hong Kong. And it was very rewarding for me doing this study and making these works within this discursive network, I suppose, because of course that was the difficult thing about the lockdown, was having these kind of daily conversations with people became difficult. And then, of course, when you did have conversations, quite often you ended up just talking about either the pandemic or the lockdown. So this series of works sort of around and about Hong Kong became a very different way of having a conversation, and a very kind of warm and close subject about which to discuss with these people. So these works very much come out of those conversations and that network.
Thank you, Hugh. Our next speaker is Elaine Ng from Fabric Lab, and she's now usually in Hong Kong, but in Dongguan, across the border. And she's nicknamed the Techno Fairy, and a British-Chinese materialogist who's also a very close Design Trust grantee designer in our community. So a lot to say about Elaine, but would you like to share your response to Critically Homemade?
Oh, hello, can you hear me? No. Perfect. Thank you, Marissa, for the introduction. And once again, thank you for involving me in a Critically Homemade exhibition. Well, just before the exhibition, I was also involved with Design Trust Futures Studio. Just a bit of background, because it's sort of intertwined and related for what I've made for Critically Homemade exhibition. I was involved with the project that looking into redesigning objects for Ho Pa Mansion, a Grade 1 listed building in Hong Kong. And we're partnering with Taiping Carpet, creating a huge 6 meter by 6 meter hand tufted carpet for the space. And we were innovating with all different type of interactive yarn, and the research and work was actually developed throughout the year. And really, the carpet was really big, and it was sort of stationary within the space. And during the project, I constantly having a thought, it would be really great if we can turn it into mini objects and people can enjoy the innovations of materials and how that can actually interact with our surroundings as well. So actually, when I received the design brief and the invitation to take part of the exhibition, I was actually taking part of a quarantine. I just traveled back from the Philippines. And then I was thinking, oh, I have nothing and I'm being locked down, and I'm not allowed to leave my home. How can I participate? And I'm trained as a weaver, and without my loom, it's almost like designers without a sketchbook and a pen. So traditionally, like a loom would be very fixated, looking like this, right? And much bigger. And not even having a hand loom at home, I was thinking, how can I design objects? But then having more conversations with students in London, then I found out actually, a lot of them, they don't have access with their equipment in university. I think that's more of an urgent problem throughout the year. Being uni students and not able to go into workshops to weave when you're learning how to weave, then I was thinking, can I think of an object that can be made from home using the skills that I know, and sort of provoke other weavers sort of learning journey or weaving. So then I have different type of toys at home. I have some 3D printing pens. So I started sketching. Well, I don't have a loom, but I have a 3D printing pen, so I can start sketching with that. And then when I was sort of playing with it, then quite quickly you can create some web-like objects. Then I thought, actually, if I can design a loom and 3D print it, it can be in any forms and shape, and I can weave along with it. And that could be an alternative way of bring technologies and weaving. And this type of sort of models of learning can then further be developed, and sort of institutions and school at earlier age can also adopt it. So that was the beginning of like my design journey and thought. But then when I came out from lockdown, as in quarantine, I found like a lot of gyms and places were being shut, so we start doing a lot of hikings and being outdoor, and then I quite quickly found a lot of people have this handheld fan, and these involve a lot of lithium battery, so it's not quite environmentally friendly, but it's a necessity because it's so hot. So I thought, oh, maybe I integrate this idea with a sort of a playful element with it. So then I started designing this fan, well, a lumen fan shape, and that's how sort of I arrived in the shape and form. But then it doesn't really work with lots of lines in between and loose yarns. So I quickly sort of got typing carpet involved and bringing the experts to head tuft the carpet in a mini size and form. So they were laughing about it because the first involvement with me was creating a really, really large scale carpet. And then this is probably the smallest carpet they've ever tufted in these interactive yarns. So one of the reasons that we wanted to use these yarns is because these yarns are UV reactive and also temperature sensitive. So when we're using outdoor and it's color changing rapidly, it's sort of warning you, maybe you should take a break under shade or so. So it's a very playful exercise, but also I think it has potentials working with college in the future, thinking about how handcraft can be merged with technologies as a potential ways of learning.
Thank you, Elaine. I actually have one in the studio. I was going to fan it at the same time with you, but what I'm starting to realize is this is such heavy times, but all of you have such light-hearted way to respond to the pandemic. So thank you. Our next speaker, also in the line of providing both a critique to the pandemic, but also a playfulness, is Fu Li, partner of Shenzhen UV Architecture, who's based in Shenzhen and offices in Beijing and LA. Welcome, Fu Li. He's another new and old friend now, and he's produced a fabulous prototype, which if we have time, we might share a short video afterwards. But please, if you could share.
Sure. Thanks, Marissa. And it's a splendid chance for me to take part in this event, because typically I'm an architect. I typically work on the huge buildings, thousands of square meters or tens of thousands of square meters. But this really gave me a great opportunity to zoom into the millimeters of how people can touch things in a subtle way, in a very subtle intervention could possibly change the society with the fingertips of movement. So we think it's quite interesting because we think it's important to keep the Chinese tradition of gathering around and sharing a meal, well, without spreading the virus. I think that's pretty critical, and I think it really depends on how we can treat the movement of our fingerprints. So what we did is actually during the pandemic, and I talked to Marissa, and we say, okay, I'll do something for it. So we really, I bring my kids' magic toy, and with a piece of metal weight I bought from a downstairs hardware store, and with my own chopsticks, and put them together. Actually, we did several prototyping, but end of the day, we figure out the right balance between the weight of the chopsticks and the strength of the magnet, and also the screen and the friction of the heavyweight between the heavyweight and the table. And we figure that that's a very subtle balance that you can put this weight on the rotating table, so everybody can easily notice it without being notifying using that sharing chopsticks, because that's quite embarrassing by reminding other people to use it. And in the old way, they put another a pair of chopsticks aside, and it's very easily to be confused. So I think psychologically, if we have a very fun piece standing on the round table, that'll be definitely helpful to remind it. So I tried this prototype with my families, and they really enjoy it. And so we just took that as our final product and shipped it out to Design Trust. And we are happy to know that they love it, and Color Living is interested in distributing it. So we come back and do another pair of final product through 2 months of prototyping. We do find a production line and get all the pieces together, and hopefully we can sell them really well. And and I really think this is a good, interesting opportunity for us as a designer to interfere with the social issues with our wisdom and our sort of technique. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so Jen, I did actually, maybe it's appropriate to show, it's just a 1-minute short film, Fu Li. Do you mind if I pull it up? I think we all need to laugh a bit because it is quite a fun little video. So give me 1 second. I will pull it up also and see if I can grab it off this.
Yeah, the video is quite fun because the animation was done by my daughter and my son, and it was mixed by my wife, and all the stereo with my family members. So.
这个软件看，你可以在抖音上面，我们这是一个。
你会拍抖音吗？
我不拍抖音，有人会拍的吗？
那我发呗。
不错，来。这样胶子。刚才你们这个网络走可不要那块吧，那个。
当然我们是不会跟主办关系的。
你不会吗？
当然不。
Yeah, those are all my family members.
It's a great video. Thank you, Fu Li. And yes, so our last group, and Fu Li mentioned this wonderful initiative, which organically just sort of accelerated and exploded. We, as a nonprofit, it's been obviously quite challenging to keep our ongoing park projects, granting projects going. So we get some extraordinarily amazing, generous companies to come and identify prototypes that they could help fabricate on the assembly line and now sell them in the store to consumers to help fundraise, and all the funding comes back to the nonprofit. So that's since been really exciting. From the winter showcase, we've been popping out over in different sites. Kapok had selected a few, such as that brick I was showing. We had a shopping mall collaborator also present the shows. Color Living also now presenting Fuli's work, a women empowerment retail space in Shomshopo also supporting us with their prototypes, like women-based cookie-themed prototypes from Indonian. We had a heritage house in Tai Hang pop up to showcase some of the extraordinary works such as Natasha's that you'll see shortly. And, you know, even very famous, well-known designers in our community also collaborating to make special shoes to masks, etc., etc. So, you know, what we have faced as December, we were going to, our wonderful next speakers, who are a trio, and really incredible designers, instigators, urbanists, and founders of Sunset Store in Pengchao, and Chen is an artist curator, also received some funding from the foundation to produce an Inter-Island Festival, which is one of our partners here. And, you know, it's extraordinary. Unfortunately, December, we couldn't launch that. But now, very soon, when we go live with the MPavilion talk at the same weekend, Inter-Island in Hong Kong, we'll be launching with a lot of exciting activities, COVID-19 safely. So over to all of you living in Pengchao, based in Pengchao right now, to share a bit about their work. So welcome.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you, Marisa, for inviting us to talk about the festival. So yeah, Chen, Kit, and Miriam here, finally making the Inter-Island Festival happen after two postponements. We were caught by the second wave of the virus and the fourth wave. And since island's residents were quite wary of the virus, we had to postpone it. Finally, now the fourth wave is slowing down, and we have a chance. Yeah, so we're hurrying and trying to make the festival happen by the last weekend of March. So the Inter-Island Festival is a festival celebrating life on the outer islands of Hong Kong and taking place on Pengchao, Zhengzhou, and the localities of Chimawan and Muiwo on Lantau Island. And as the island life is quite particular in Hong Kong and really different from the skyscraper typology, we really want to show, like, especially in the times of the COVID virus, that there is a possibility for an alternative urban environment that is where people's habitat is more blending with the natural environment and more respectful sometimes of it. And as there is also major threats to this type of living, we want to celebrate and bring people together around this life and this unique life. So we've invited like more than 30 collaborators to propose work that reinterpret the local culture through various media. And we have installations, workshops, tours, performances that take place in the different locations and over 3 days to show, like, the particularity but similarities also of this island life. And for us, it was particularly important to organize this festival at this time to foster the island feeling and also give an opportunity to the islanders to really enjoy their environment despite the pandemic. And we can talk more about some projects that we have here.
Yeah. You start first?
Yeah, I can start first. Like, according to just now, Marisa says, like, Natasha is one of the designers.
Let me comment. Okay.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Since I already mentioned, so she's one of the Design Trust grantees. She will be also in one of the speaker collaborator of our Inter-Island Festival. She will facilitate her talk in Jimawan. The concept of this talk is to show the urban as a possibility, island as a possibility of urban. So she choose, like, peer as the transaction between urban and so-called rural transaction as the place to talk. So she already invite a few speakers, but here I keep it as a secret because you will announce it like later in our social media. So stay tuned for that, and maybe we can go back to the
last slide.
Very quick mention at the left-hand side, lower corner would be a Hong Kong public space initiative. They will have an online show, now moved to online, talks about the urban space in the Changzhou area. I think usually urban space being talked in a city, in an urban area, but they're concerned about like how 30,000 people living in Changzhou, quite dense areas, but on the island, this kind of like special arrangement, how it will be. So this will be an online show.
Then maybe I just talk about connecting table.
咁
你 talk 咁我冇嘢講嘅，咁你講。Go ahead.
So right hand side lower corner is the collaboration between between our Swiss architect. She is teaching in Hong Kong U, but based in Pengchao basically. And usually I should collaborate with a local handcraft zizat master, so which is like a traditional way of making bamboo connecting structure, which is always happen in festival. So this work is planned to show that how new form of architect can be using with this kind of traditional handmade method. To one of the possibilities is to show, like usually in a festival you have a lot of like big architecture which is experimental, and you're going to trash or how you have to deal with it after the experiment of the festival. But like there's already a tradition of this zizat bamboo structure that's every year have in Pengchao, that every year people make a huge like 5-meter craft ghost king and burn afterward. So this is already quite interesting way of how showing a possibility of like a festival or experiment architect. So in this photo is showing how they collaborate together and make a huge, very long 30-meter connecting table through this zizat material to show the first how to bring this zizat traditional further, and also how this kind of like festival architecture showing can be in a new form. Yeah. So this is a few highlight about our festival. Then you can go online to look for more.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. And just the healing metronome, I know you, Wendy, is also an island resident. So she's also been part of our community, creating a very emotional healing metronome to calm our spirits during such times. And that's also where I'm going to conclude, because I know we're running out of time and Jen is patiently waiting, hopefully to probe further the designers and panelists with discussions. So I just wanted to thank everyone. This micro initiative has been extremely empowering. And I could share a little bit more towards the end, as we really wanted to launch officially our prototypes in reality around the world. And hopefully Melbourne will be able to invite us to showcase them in the future. So over to you, Jen. Thank you so much. And I'm going to stop sharing this and over to you. So thank you again. Give me 1 second.
Thanks so much, Marissa, and thank you everyone for showing such brilliant projects. It's so, like, it's funny, I was writing notes and the kind of descriptions that I have circled at our citywide homemade family, community and scale, which I feel like is kind of an overview of hearing where each of you have had these amazingly playful and personal responses to, as Marissa said, such a heavy time. So it's just been an absolute joy to listen to you here, listen to you all describe them. So I guess to kind of follow on from the order in which you were all presenting, Frederick, I'll start with you. And I mean, really, it's just such beautiful work, and such an amazing kind of story to hear your family coming together to collaborate in such a way, because I feel like these are the unforeseen things that happened during the lockdown. I mean, for starters, I guess I'm actually just really interested to know, particularly with the Inter-Island Festival, whether there is a program that relates to the design objects. And to hear how you're kind of saying about that people should be exercising using them. Have you got any hot tips on how to exercise with them?
Basically, the way you would be exercising them with them in the gym, it's in a very, very similar way. So we were trying to create objects that get very close to the real deal. A good friend of ours is actually a gym coach, so she gave me some insights, and we tried to implement that into the designs as we were going with them. So, but yeah, it was really very nice to have the family come together. It was made by family for family, basically. And it was fun to see how everybody was chipping in making these, and how everybody kept using them afterwards as well, until we had to separate with them and we donated them to the Design Trust.
Totally. And I mean, it's so interesting when I think about the I guess the rise in YouTube solitary exercising, and how people, all turn to the internet to participate in these online classes. And actually, I feel like you creating something so tangible has really kept to the core of what the possibilities of these design objects could have. And I guess the other thing I was thinking about was hearing you describe how you saw the water bottle on your table, and that's something that you then ended up incorporating into the design. Has this process with Marissa and the Critically Homemade exhibition kind of changed or shifted your perception at all into how you think about your design process, and being in a confined space? How has that affected
it is very much the way we usually work. Like, I find a lot of inspiration in the small things around us, and it's just random connections that happen in the brain when you see something like, hey, that could actually be that, or what if we do this with that? And unexpected things come out of there. In the design process, we sometimes take one of the elements and turn it upside down and see what it does to the entirety of the object. And you can have very surprising results from there. And it was actually it was almost work, but work is a hobby for us. So it came very spontaneously, obviously. And when we're all sitting around the table and these ideas are being bounced around, it was actually a lot of fun.
Well, congratulations, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm very keen to try it out. So moving on, Hugh, you are an interdisciplinary artist, curator and researcher, an M+ Design Trust Research Fellow. And I've been so lucky to have met you a few times now at MPavilion in person, and actually only just in December. And I'm so interested to hear about your experience in shifting from your research into culture and games and play, and obviously particularly around video games. What was it that changed specifically into you designing something so tangible and so specific as a sealed stamp?
That is an interesting question, but I suppose for me, the sensation I have with digital spaces and physical spaces is quite often quite similar. And I guess I've worked a lot in digital contexts and formats. I was a multi-platform producer for a while and worked in film and television and those contexts. But my training, my study from undergraduate right up to PhD, has always involved sculpture. So I'm very interested in spaces sculpturally, whether they are cities or objects or video games. I suppose I always approach those spaces and objects sculpturally and architecturally. So, and scales, I suppose, when you're dealing with things digitally, can shift radically without even thinking about it. So for me, creating, and as I say, like those objects, many of them I created in 2016 and I kind of had to repair or resurrect, but they were things already lying around the house. But yeah, I suppose for me, the slippage between the digital and the physical is always there. I always have a sense of the materiality of the digital, I guess, to speak about it in sculptural terms. This was something that was very controversial when I was studying sculpture, the idea that digital also had a strong materiality and a strong sense of, I mean, every material, whether it be wood or clay or pixels, has particular accents and particular limits to what you can do with it. So for me, it's another format, I suppose. And for me, subject matter is probably the more radical change. But yeah, the difference between the digital and the tangible is for me reducing more and more and more. I don't know if that answers your question, but
no, it does. It's really nice to hear about that trajectory of your thinking and also the existence of the work that kind of has always been there bubbling away. And actually, again, I think it's kind of the beauty of these projects is that they have the capacity to bring those things to life that, you know, maybe there wasn't another opportunity at another time. So no, it really does. And I kind of love that it's so radically different from the virtual to having something so tangible as when I think of seal stamps, it is always writing letters and sealing a stamp, but it's so craft based and it's so handheld, so it's beautiful. And just a quick one in terms of the design on the stamps. Are they all, and how many stamps are there, and are they each different? And if so, kind of which building is reflected in which?
Sure. So at this point, there are 4 stamps. And they are the Chinese Bank of Hong Kong, the original HSBC, the Chinese, the mainland sort of military building that has a sort of strange shape. And what was the 4th one? I can't remember. Is it the Bank of Shanghai? Is that the one that's part of the collection, Marissa? There is one. I'm
trying to pull up your images. It's so funny with your connotations because obviously it's now, yes, the headquarters of the PLA, but then formerly is a British colonial building.
Precisely.
And I believe, it's the Bank of China building by IMPay, the HSBC building by Norman Foster, correct?
That's right. That's correct.
Yes. So am I missing something?
No, I think that we may have covered all of them at this stage. But in terms of getting to your other question, Jen, about the design, that was probably the area where I did most collaboration recently. And in the end, we decided to go with completely abstracted design rather than following specific like Hangzi, which was sort of, you know, morphed into encoded into the stamp. I've been creating a few, like I'm kind of interested in the relationship between traditional and ancient Chinese seal stamps and contemporary QR codes, which have like flourished, at least in this country, with during COVID-19. But also, between those two things and notions of coding and how those original seal stamps became more and more coded and difficult to create and difficult to read through history, and to a point where I'm now just I literally make little mazes with those stamps, just as a sort of way of making them abstract and intangible. but quite often I draw influence from various different traditional Chinese stamps, but also maps, as in topographic maps of cities. I try and incorporate that into some of the design as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I was so curious, Jen, sorry to jump in, on his reading group. You need to let us know more about your reading list, the Hong Kong history books.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a group that myself and a couple of other people started just over close to 18 months ago now. And it was in response to another things. A lot of it was the unrest that was happening in Hong Kong, but it was also related to my own research and related to histories and identities in Hong Kong. And there's, I guess, probably about 7 to 10 regulars. And for most of last year, we were meeting every week and discussing either an academic text or a media text discussing history, identity, politics, social aspects, or art histories of Hong Kong. And we haven't met for a little while, I think just because all of us have taken a bit of a break. But a group of us, I wasn't there actually, but a group met in a Hong Kong cafe in Melbourne on Monday, 2 days ago, and we're planning to meet again next week.
Great. Elaine, really, it's great to hear about your project, and very entertaining to hear that you're called the Techno Fairy. It's a very good nickname. And I thought, hearing again this idea of your work, the scale of it, and being a giant carpet into coming to something that is so small, I think is again such a kind of product of the time in which we're living in, and of course the essence of this exhibition. But there's something about this idea of holding this kind of piece of carpet in your hand that I found particularly inspiring on lots of levels. And reading about your work and kind of hearing you discuss it, there's obviously a huge demand for luxury product design in China. And I'm curious to understand whether, I guess this is due to the quality of the design, but also kind of as a symbol of prestige about having these products. And it feels like your work is kind of this amazing marrying of the two in a very playful way. And I wonder whether you could kind of speak to those ideas and perhaps share any thoughts or ideas you have about the future possibilities of design in China.
Yeah, I think there are many questions in there, Jen.
Yeah, it's an elaborate question.
Yeah, no, I think just to give a bit of background about the carpet that I actually didn't explain properly earlier, was the carpet. When I was invited to design the carpet, actually there was a very specific brief. The very specific brief came from Antiquities and Monument Organization in Hong Kong, because it was a listed building. All the objects had to be very carefully curated and considered to replace and put it back into the building itself. Now, the carpet that I have designed for the space is actually a missing carpet for the mention. And it has a significant values and context because it was at the main room, so that it appears in many pictures in the reception room. So they wanted to replace the carpet. So they specifically said, Elaine, can you please design a replica that's identical to the original carpet? So being a designer receiving a design brief to design an exact replica, it's very funny. Do you know, like, is there any work for me to do? Luckily, there was, because during the research, there was a lot of missing pictures and there wasn't actually one complete image of the carpet itself. So then it gave room to imagine and argue or to challenge and discuss how do we use design to promote conservation work as such. And that's why we, together with having a design trust, we came up with quite a strong case how to sort of redesign a carpet into a design placement that's fit the future use and the purpose of the space. So saying that, it's sort of the traditional mindsets of a lot of conservation works is to create replica and to mimic. Now, so that's bring to your question. In China, traditionally in industrial designs, the better you can mimic a famous brand or well-known brand, you do an excellent job. You're so a local brand's boss or CEO be praising you because you can mimic sort of like an Italian brand so well, the technique and stuff. But I think throughout this COVID period and also in the past 10 years, Chinese audience became a lot more sophisticated. They have been abroad. Now they've been back to the country. They understand actually that's a lot that they can innovate with their own skills and techniques. I mean, for example, different ways of looking at smart devices and IoT and using apps and stuff. And I think in China is a pretty leading market in terms of smart living. So the audience is and also sustainability. I think China's always been very behind with like sustainability and materials. They're trying to play catch up because there's so many people in China. It's really difficult. The education always stop within tier 1, and that's still tier 2, 3, 4 to catch up the understanding of sort of excessive use of plastics and all that, the convenience of products. So I think the trend of like sort of China product are shifting constantly, especially during the COVID period. They are trying to be a bit more cautious about health and well-being, but also they're also very price sensitive.
It sounds like such a complex scenario, and I think you did a really good job at answering, given how loaded the question was. And in terms of this kind of, I wondered if you could speak slightly more also about the kind of teaching behind the weaving and how you've managed to sustain those kind of things during the pandemic also, because I think that's, for me, understanding weaving, or I mean, I know you've got your 3D printing pen, but it's so much about kind of coming together as a community to produce these things.
Yeah, my background is trained as a weaver from Central St. Martin's, and since I started my studio, I've always had we have a really good relationship with St. Martin's, and they have internship programs, and during COVID time, actually, I've stopped I was thinking to stop like taking interns in, and then I found out I've got calls from my previous intern and said, oh, actually, college have closed. They don't have access to college. They were panicking of not able to complete their final collection because they have no tools. And that was actually one of the key inspirations. And that's only just one student. And there are many more students having the same difficulties, especially when you're practice-based sort of students in design and art, when you can't access, and no one really owns like a big loom in the house, a student can't afford to do that. So I think that's one of the way that inspired me to think out of the box. We are all very familiar with sort of softwares, Adobe's and stuff. So having these sort of like basic knowledge that can help us to think out of the box, designing the files, then actually can send to someone that have access of the printer. So actually, then you can receive it. So how do you design in a more agile way that collaborative within the community, thinking about all these makerspace available, make good use of those and then design the tools you need. And I think as traditional, like sort of craft person, we were very fixated with what tool that we have and trained to use. And I've always been sort of hugging my loom for years and said, oh, without a loom, I can't make anything. I can't do anything until this pandemic. And I said, so what if I don't have it? There's so many more skill set I have built up in the past years. There must be something I could do. I mean, I couldn't actually believe I have to be kicked by a student's thought to think about this quite urgently. So, and I hope this can inspire students to work in this way, and also more of the institutes and schools and different levels to make use of it, because this is just a very simple framework. There's so many ways that we can extrapolate and build upon of that into a really good collaborative exercise.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's so innovative. And I think, again, it's like having those restrictions in place really make you think harder and smarter. And actually, sometimes there is this answer right in front of you. And I think in relation to the fans, they're incredible. So thank you for sharing. Fu Li, the samurai chopsticks. I think you're there somewhere.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm just, yeah, it's brilliant hearing again about your kind of family process in designing them. And I think Marissa was right. Watching the video is a very cute insight into the process, and to see your kind of response to something that is so needed and is obviously in terms of hygiene component is quite a scary thing. So great. And hearing you kind of describe it as this really subtle way of responding, I thought was brilliant. And I mean, there's lots of things that design has an impact on, but also is impacted by. And I guess one of the things I was thinking about with this was, how do we design the post-pandemic dining experience? I think that's a small thing, which actually has so much potential in this context. And, and will they stick around? Thinking about the mask in context of SARS, it's become normalized to wear a mask. And, in this instance, have you got kind of any insights or thoughts around these dining experiences, and if there is anything that you think will stay post-pandemic?
Oh yeah, that's a really interesting question. Because this project is really trying to reflect a huge social problem through a very subtle piece. Actually, what it really aimed is a lifestyle. The lifestyle which doesn't, which was not real a new thing, that we do share food. Because of this, actually, Chinese people has more digested health problems or diseases than the rest part of the world. Actually, this epidemic, I think, give us an opportunity, if you look at it that way, to really focus on this issue and turn this crisis into opportunity. Because even without the COVID, many people died from the stomach cancer in China. A lot because the transmission of the disease can potentially turn into cancer. So I think with this epidemic, which we have to face, which we cannot escape from, why don't we change it into opportunity to revive another thinking of how we share and how we keep our tradition while living a more healthy lifestyle? Because people are resisting using a sharing chopstick before, but now we have a very good excuse, or if you put it that way, a good excuse or a good reason to make them think twice or think seriously about how to share their food without embarrassment. So I think that's something we are looking at. I think that is very important for us, for me, not only to do a homemade artwork, but also trying to commercialize it. We're actually working on a new round of prototyping. We're trying to reduce the cost. We are trying to make it affordable of every dining table, because during this past Chinese New Year, everybody is sharing their family meal photos on their social media. So actually, I collect all of them. You can see that there's a big opportunities there. And if we have this samurai or whatever little device on every table with a very, very minimum cost, I think that'll be a really big thing for the future.
Totally. I think, the seismic shifts that can happen, as we're describing, from these kind of subtle shifts of etiquette and dining, as you describe, it has a huge impact. Like you say, the kind of knock-on effects of how the pandemic will affect people, and the idea of making the design accessible and affordable for the masses is it's great. So thank you so much for expanding on the design and the future of it. It's really, really exciting.
Thank you.
So last, Inter-Island Festivalers. And Co, it's so nice to speak with you all. And thank you so much for sparing this time ahead of your launch. I know I can really resonate with the uncertainties of a festival going ahead or not going ahead or changing. And so I really appreciate you giving up the time so close to your launch. And I guess from the prospect of talking about a festival and, hearing you describe putting it on hold and kind of the transitions of it. I'm really interested to actually hear from you all about how the effect of working during lockdown, and assume it points in an isolated capacity, has informed the way you've made decisions about curating a festival.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, I don't need, you go.
No, I guess we've learned to, to adapt to the, we see that there's always a way to make things happen in the end. So a lot of the workshops, tours, we were very attached to having the festival happen and connections happen in person. So there was always the option of putting the festival on the virtual platform and having everything happen online. But we thought that with this, we would lose the essence of the festival, which is really experiencing the spaces, experiencing the connection with the others and the place of the festival. So we really thought about how we can move on with this. So actually, most of the activities we have are small capacity. So it's a small number of people gathering. So there are actually a few government regulations of a lot of guidelines now about how to make everyone feel safer and how to implement hygiene measures. So we kind of follow this, and we find out that we can always find a balance. I mean, we can always find a way with.
Yeah, and also at one point when there are more and more guidelines and restrictions, you cannot do this, you cannot do that, which really restrict the possibility of the festival, we still try to think of them as yet another design challenge in this time. Like we are still complying with the rules, but somehow we play around with it to make sure we will not be caught, but we do the thing. So I guess that's how it goes.
Yeah, especially for performances, maybe like we cannot gather, like we cannot have gatherings of more than 4 people. So how to do the
yeah, so
oh, go ahead.
So we were thinking, maybe we need the police to identify that we have groups of 4 people rather than a large crowd of people. So what we are thinking now is to offer them stickers like in different colors. So when the police really come, they could really see they are groups of 4 people to make sure we are complying with the gathering restrictions. So we are thinking of things like this to really make the festival happen.
And keep it playful somehow.
Yeah, keep it playful is important.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more with keeping it playful. I think it is exactly what people need. And I think it's just a huge act of resilience to kind of keep thinking through the logistics of how to deliver it. And I'm sure it'll be a huge success. And no doubt people will be very, very ready to come back to festivals and participate in these things. So good luck with it. Thank you all of you for taking the time and sharing such brilliant insights. And it's been a real treat to hear more about the projects. And I can't wait to hopefully see some of them in real life at some point in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen.
My pleasure. Do you want to, just thinking in a realm of being able to edit this also, would you want to show, is there another video that you want me to show?
Yeah, no, so, I mean, it's the Critically Homemade program by the Design Trust kind of umbrella is really about the generosity of giving and making. And so we will be launching a documentary, I think it's 20 minutes long, on the evening that you'll be broadcasting. So I'm very excited about that. We won't show it now, just because of the time issues. But also just want to thank you. I mean, when I look at Hugh, to Frederick, to Inter Islanders, and Jen yourself with your recent hair salon project, and also Fuli's chopsticks, radical chopsticks, and Elaine's work, it's reminding me in the hope I have design can really innovate and really connect beyond borders. There's a lot of debate and discussion, and I do this really empowers me to think our roles as designers or instigators of culture really can connect communities. And there's a lot of politics and unnecessary noise right now, but I do think this kind of, I keep using this rainbow of optimism is really about inclusivity and generosity of spirit. So I really hope to connect again with all of you and see you at the Island Festival. But yes, we'll be launching the documentary on the evening at MPavilion. So thank you for having us. Sincerely.
Thank you.
And please continue to buy our chopsticks and the fans. Everything is on the e-pop-up shop. It's the first time we've ever done, as a nonprofit, a e-commerce site. So that's been my challenge, navigating something completely that is very different in how we should run things. So the online, offline blended landscape, I think is the reality and the norms. So yes. Thank you all, for coming together. Thank you. See you.
Bye.